The massive council chamber of Horbium-17 fell silent as Irwin stood before the 7 blue-skinned aliens, their elongated heads crowned with bony ridges that signaled their elevated status. Blood trickled down his temple, his uniform torn and stained with the evidence of the battle that had raged just hours before. Space had burned with the debris of ships and the screams of the dying, but Irwin had disobeyed direct orders to save 3 transport vessels filled with refugees. Now he stood trial before beings who viewed humans as little more than useful tools. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion and the lingering effects of adrenaline. The faces of those he'd saved flashed through his mind, children clutching parents, the elderly helping each other stumble to safety. Worth any punishment these cold-blooded bureaucrats could devise. "Commander Irwin," the central counselor spoke, voice like gravel sliding down a metal chute. "Your insubordination cannot be overlooked, yet your tactical abilities remain valuable." The alien's thin lips barely moved as it continued. "We have a mission that requires your particular skills." Irwin knew a death sentence when he heard one dressed up as an opportunity. His jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth, but he maintained the rigid posture the council expected. "What mission, counselor?" "Archie per 5, another council member said, sliding a data tablet across the polished black table. "A planet rich in rare minerals vital to our war effort." The first images that appeared on the screen made Irwin's stomach lurch. Swamp-like plains stretching to the horizon, clouds of toxic gas billowing from cracks in the earth, a sky that looked infected with rust-colored patterns. He'd heard whispers about Archie per 5. No one returned from there. Memories resurfaced of his mentor, Captain Rodriguez, who had been sent on a special reconnaissance mission after questioning Imperial tactics against civilian targets. The official report claimed he died in a landing accident. Now Irwin understood what had really happened. "We require someone to establish a preliminary assessment of mining possibilities," the counselor continued, yellow eyes unblinking. "Your pod leaves in 3 hours." Irwin looked up from the tablet, meeting the alien's gaze directly. "And if I refuse?" The council chamber filled with a sound like dry branches snapping. Laughter. "Then execution for your crimes against the Imperium would be immediate rather than probable." He thought of fighting his way out, 6 guards all armed, but he'd faced worse odds. Then reason prevailed. Escape now would only lead to a manhunt that would end with his death anyway. At least this way, he had time. Time to think, time to plan, time to survive. "When do I leave?" Irwin asked, his voice steady despite the rage burning inside him. 3 hours, the counselor repeated. "Engineer Julia Williams will accompany you. She has similar disciplinary issues that require addressing." As Irwin was escorted from the chamber, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the polished metal walls. Blood-streaked face, hollow eyes, the face of a man who had already cheated death more times than he deserved. One more time, he promised himself. Just one more time. The preparation bay was sterile and cold. Technicians moving with the efficiency of those who knew their work could mean life or death for others, but felt no personal investment in the outcome. Irwin's wounds were treated perfunctorily: antibacterial spray, synthetic skin for the deeper cuts, a stimulant injection to counter fatigue. "Standard survival kit," a technician explained, handing him a pack that seemed insultingly small for the challenge ahead. "Water purification, ration bars, basic medical supplies, emergency beacon if you complete your mission successfully." If, not when. The distinction wasn't lost on Irwin. He was changing into the environmental suit provided, designed to filter the worst of the planet's toxic atmosphere, but clearly not built for extended use. When the door slid open to admit a woman with fiery red hair and a defiance set to her jaw. Despite the circumstances, she carried herself with dignity, her movements precise and controlled. "Commander Irwin," she said, extending her hand. "Julia Williams. I've been informed we'll be working together on this expedition." Her handshake was firm, her eyes direct. No fear, just resignation tempered with determination. Irwin found himself respecting her immediately. "What did you do to earn this death sentence?" he asked, keeping his voice low. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I designed shields that would have protected refugee ships better than military vessels. I presented my findings directly to the admiral, suggested we prioritize civilian protection. The smile faded. Apparently that qualifies as sedition now. Saving lives seems to be a punishable offense these days, Irwin replied grimly. So I've noticed, Julia said, glancing at his injuries. I heard about what you did. 3 transport ships against direct orders. That took courage. It was the right thing to do. Yes, she agreed simply. It was. 3 hours later, Irwin sat strapped into a transport pod, barely large enough for 2 humans. Beside him, Julia frantically checked systems, her fingers dancing over control panels. Red hair pulled back in a tight knot at the base of her neck. They say no one comes back from Archie Per 5, she whispered, not looking up from her work. Her voice caught slightly on the last word. Irwin noticed a slight tremor in her hands, the same tremor he'd seen in new recruits before their first combat drop. You didn't volunteer for this, did you? He asked quietly. Julia's hand stilled for a moment. I designed modifications to our shields that would protect civilian transports better than military vessels. The Admiralty didn't appreciate the implication, that they were prioritizing warships over refugee convoys. A bitter smile crossed her face. Apparently that's treason. Irwin felt a newfound respect for the engineer. Then we're both here for trying to save lives. And likely to lose ours in the process, she replied, returning to her work. This pod is barely space-worthy. The atmospheric shielding is substandard, the navigation system is outdated, and the landing gear looks like it's been salvaged from 3 different vehicles. Can you make it work? Julia's expression hardened into determination. I can try, but I don't think they want us to succeed. Irwin tightened the strap across his chest. There's a first time for everything. The pod shuddered as it detached from Horbium 17, thrusters firing to push them away from the massive station that hung like a metal spider in the emptiness of space. Through the viewport, Irwin watched the station recede, its gleaming surfaces hiding the corruption within. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what would happen if he never returned. Would anyone mourn him? His parents were long dead, victims of an imperial pacification campaign on a border world. His brother might still be alive somewhere, but they hadn't spoken in years, separated by the cruel efficiency of imperial bureaucracy. Julia initiated the hyperdrive sequence, and stars stretched into lines around them as the vessel hurtled through the void toward what most considered certain death. Irwin closed his eyes, letting the familiar sensation of hyperjump wash over him. His thoughts drifted to the family he barely remembered. Parents lost in the imperial annexation of Earth's outer colonies. A brother he hadn't seen since they were separated during the refugee processing. 20 years serving an empire that had taken everything from him, and now they were sending him to die on a poison world. The irony wasn't lost on him. Approaching exit coordinates, Julia announced, her voice cutting through his reverie. Prepare for re-entry. This isn't going to be pleasant. The hyperjump ended with a violent shudder that nearly tore their restraints. Before them hung Archie Per 5, a sickly orb that seemed to pulse with hostility. Even from orbit, they could see the angry red storms that swept across its surface, the yellowish clouds of toxic gas that choked its atmosphere. Nothing about it invited habitation. It was a world designed by nature or fate to reject life. Beginning descent, Julia said, her voice clinical as she fought to control the pod systems. Primary thrusters responding at 60% capacity, atmospheric shielding holding, but showing stress fractures. Landing became an immediate nightmare as atmospheric interference scrambled their navigation systems. The pod plummeted, controls responding sluggishly as Julia fought to establish a landing trajectory. Warning alerts screamed from every console, red lights flashing as systems failed one after another. Stabilizers failing, she shouted over the screaming of overstressed metal. Primary thrusters offline. Can we eject? Irwin asked, gripping his harness as the pod spun wildly. Julia's face was illuminated by the flashing red emergency lights, revealing a determined grimace. Negative. We'd be shredded in this atmosphere. I'm going to try something. Her fingers flew across the controls, rerouting power in ways the pod's designers had likely never anticipated. For a moment, the spinning slowed, giving them a horrifyingly clear view of the rapidly approaching ground. A vast swamp that stretched to the horizon, punctuated by jagged rock formations that thrust upward like accusing fingers. "Brace yourself," she screamed as the surface rushed up to meet them. The impact knocked Irwin unconscious for several seconds. When he came to, the pod was half buried in thick mud, emergency lights casting an eerie red glow over Julia's face as she unfastened her harness. A gash on her forehead leaked blood down her cheek, but her eyes were alert, focused. "We're alive," she said, sounding surprised. "Life support says the air is technically breathable, but contains high levels of particulate matter and sulfur compounds." Irwin unstrapped himself and reached for the emergency pack beneath his seat. Pain shot through his ribs, probably cracked, possibly broken. He pushed the discomfort aside. Survival took precedence over comfort. "Technically breathable is good enough for now." The pod's hatch groaned as hydraulics fought against the mud. When it finally opened, a wave of hot, acrid air flooded in, tasting like smoke and decay. Irwin stepped out first, boots sinking ankle-deep in the muck. The landscape stretched before them like something from a fever dream. Twisted vegetation in shades of purple and blue, geysers of yellow gas erupting in the distance, and a constant low moaning that seemed to come from the planet itself. He helped Julia out of the pod, noticing her wince as she put weight on her left ankle. "How bad?" he asked. "I'll manage," she replied tersely, pulling a portable scanner from her pack and sweeping it around them. "Radiation levels acceptable, but there are chemical compounds in the air I can't identify. We should use the respirators when possible to conserve filter capacity." Irwin surveyed the landscape, military training kicking in automatically. No immediate shelter, no clean water source visible, no obvious food sources. The twisted vegetation might be edible, but it might also be toxic. The mud beneath their feet bubbled occasionally, releasing sulfurous gas that made his eyes water. "We need to get to higher ground," he decided. "Find shelter, assess resources." "The pod's communication system is fried," Julia reported after a quick check. "No way to call for help. Not that anyone would come." "We're on our own," Irwin confirmed, shouldering his pack. "Just how they planned it." As they prepared to move out, Irwin paused, sensing something watching them from the thick mist that clung to the swamp. A shadow moved, something large, then vanished. He unholstered his blaster, checking the charge. Half power, another subtle sabotage. "Keep your blaster ready," Irwin instructed Julia as they retrieved what supplies they could from the pod. "We need to find higher ground." They trudged through the swamp for an hour, each step requiring effort as the mud tried to claim their boots. The weird groaning sound grew louder, sometimes punctuated by high-pitched shrieks that set their nerves on edge. As the light began to fade, the sun here was a dim red orb that barely penetrated the toxic clouds. A thick mist rolled in, reducing visibility to mere feet. "We're being followed," Irwin murmured, not turning his head but adjusting his grip on his weapon. Julia's breath caught. "How many?" "Can't tell. Stay close." They continued forward, the sense of being watched growing stronger with each step. When Julia stumbled, her injured ankle giving way, Irwin caught her before she could fall into what looked like ordinary mud, but bubbled ominously. The near miss sent a cold spike of fear through him. How many ways could this planet kill them that they didn't even understand yet? "Look," Julia whispered, pointing to a rocky outcropping, perhaps half a mile ahead. "Shelter." Irwin nodded. "Let's move." Carefully. They had covered half the distance when the ground beneath them shifted, the mud suddenly becoming liquid. Julia cried out as she sank to her knees, the toxic sludge pulling her down with frightening speed. "Irwin!" she gasped, struggling to free herself. He dropped his pack, lunging for her outstretched hand. Their fingers connected, but the mud was stronger, sucking her down with relentless force. Irwin threw himself flat on more solid ground, extending his body to give her leverage. "Stop struggling," he commanded. "It's like quicksand. The more you fight, the faster you sink." Julia forced herself to be still, though her eyes were wide with terror. Slowly, methodically, Irwin pulled, using every ounce of strength left in his battle-worn body. The mud released her reluctantly, with a sickening, slurping sound. When she was finally free, they lay on solid ground, both gasping for breath. "That's one way to die here," Julia said shakily, examining her legs. The mud had eaten through her environmental suit, leaving angry red welts on the exposed skin. "Acidic compounds. Nothing immediately lethal, but we'll need to clean and bandage this. Irwin helped her to her feet. At the shelter, we need to... He stopped suddenly, raising his hand. Something's coming. Through the fog emerged a massive shape, moving with surprising silence for its size. Irwin raised his plasma rifle, finger hovering over the trigger, as the creature stepped fully into view. It stood taller than a man, with leathery blue-gray skin stretched over powerful muscles. 4 eyes glowed amber in the mist, fixed intently on the humans. Most terrifying were the horns, 3 of them protruding from its skull in a triangular pattern, each ending in a wickedly sharp point. Irwin's finger tightened on the trigger, but something made him hesitate. The beast wasn't charging, it was watching, studying them with an intelligence that seemed incongruous with its monstrous appearance. "Irwin," Julia whispered, voice tight with fear. "Shoot it." "No," he replied, not lowering his weapon but not firing either. "It's not attacking." The creature's nostrils flared as it scented the air. Then it made a sound somewhere between a growl and a purr. It took 1 step forward, causing Julia to gasp, then abruptly turned and disappeared back into the mist. "It's like it understood you," Julia said, her voice shaking. "Maybe it did," Irwin murmured, finally lowering his weapon. "Come on, we need shelter before nightfall." They pressed on, finally reaching the rocky outcropping as the last of the dim light faded from the sky. The formation provided minimal protection, a shallow cave carved into the base of a cliff, but it was dry and defensible. As they set up a rudimentary camp, Irwin noticed something odd, the remnants of a fire, not more than a day old, and beside it, a crude spear fashioned from local wood and what looked like bone. "We're not alone here," he said, picking up the weapon and testing its weight. "Someone knows how to survive on this hellhole." "Impossible," Julia replied, setting up a portable heater. "The council said this planet is uninhabited except for wildlife." "The council says a lot of things," Irwin replied grimly. "Most of them lies." While Julia treated her acid burns, Irwin explored the cave further. In the back, partially hidden behind a rock, he found a bundle of dried plants that looked like they might be medicinal. There were symbols scratched into the wall, not random markings but deliberate communication. Some he recognized as a derivative of the Salkirian script used in border regions. "Someone was living here," he reported, returning to their makeshift camp. "Recently, and they were organized enough to leave supplies and messages for others." "Messages saying what?" Julia asked, wincing as she applied antiseptic to her wounds. "I can only make out parts of it. Warning about crawlers in the lowlands, something about safe water sources to the north." He paused, and a reference to sanctuary. As night fell completely, the environment transformed. Bioluminescent fungi began to glow with an eerie blue light, illuminating the mist in ghostly patterns. Strange creatures called in the darkness. Some sounds so alien they raised the hair on Irwin's neck, others disturbingly similar to human screams. Julia huddled closer to the heater, shivering despite the oppressive heat. Why would they send us here? What could possibly be worth mining in this nightmare? Irwin stared into the darkness, keeping watch. "Control. The Imperium's a foundation is built on fear. Planets like this are the ultimate threat. Disobey, and you disappear to a place where even your bones won't be recovered." They ate a meager meal from their rations, then took turns keeping watch. During his shift, Irwin continually scanned the mist, certain they were being observed. The feeling was confirmed when he spotted movement, deliberate, intelligent movement, at the edge of their small circle of light. Not animal, but person. "I know you're there," Irwin called softly. "We're not Imperial soldiers. Not anymore." No response came, but the watching presence remained, a shadow among shadows. Irwin settled back, maintaining his vigilance, but not forcing a confrontation. Whoever was watching them could have attacked while they slept, if that had been their intention. When dawn finally broke, a gradual lightening of the perpetual gloom rather than a true sunrise, they broke camp and continued their journey toward higher ground. Julia's ankle had swollen overnight, but she refused to complain, keeping pace despite the obvious pain. "You should have been a soldier," Irwin remarked as she navigated a particularly treacherous section of ground. Julia snorted. "I turned down officer training to stay in R&D. Thought I could do more good designing systems than commanding troops." Her expression darkened. "Look how well that turned out." They had barely walked for an hour when Irwin sensed movement behind them. He whirled, blaster raised, to find himself facing a spear point aimed directly at his chest. Holding the weapon was a humanoid figure with blue skin and tribal markings etched across a face that looked both alien and familiar. "Lower your weapon, off-worlder," the blue-skinned warrior said in heavily accented standard. "This place is not for strangers, but if you wish to live, you will follow me now." Irwin slowly lowered his blaster. "Who are you?" "I am Carl," the warrior replied, "once navigator of the Imperial vessel Thunderhead, now hunter of the Forgotten Lands, and you are trespassing in dangerous territory." Irwin evaluated his options quickly. The warrior was clearly adapted to this environment and knew how to survive here. "Lead the way, Carl. We'll follow." Carl guided them through the treacherous landscape with confident ease, avoiding sinkholes and toxic vents that would have claimed them without his knowledge. As they walked, he explained in terse sentences how he'd come to be here. His ship had been sent to survey the planet 5 years earlier, but when they discovered evidence of previous Imperial missions and survivors, their communications had been jammed and reinforcements sent to eliminate them instead of extract them. "My captain realized what was happening and ordered us to scatter," Carl said, his expression hardening at the memory. "8 of us made it to the caves. 3 are still alive." "The Imperium tried to kill their own survey team?" Julia asked incredulously. Carl's laugh was bitter. "The Imperium cannot allow evidence that Archipper 5 is survivable. It would undermine their ultimate threat." As they traversed a particularly dangerous section of swampland, Carl stopped suddenly, raising his hand for silence. From the mist emerged 2 more blue-skinned warriors, weapons at the ready. "What have you brought us, Carl?" one demanded, eyeing the humans with suspicion. "More discarded," Carl replied. "The woman is wounded. They need shelter." The warriors conferred briefly in their native language, then nodded grudgingly. "The chief will decide, Countiner," one said finally. "Bring them, but they are your responsibility." After several hours of hard travel, they approached what appeared to be a sheer cliff face. Carl placed his hand on a specific rock, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a tunnel carved into the mountain. "Welcome to Sanctuary," he said, gesturing for them to enter. "Stay close. Some here have strong feelings about Imperial humans." The tunnel opened into a vast cavern that housed an entire settlement. Homes had been carved directly into the rock walls, connected by narrow walkways. Fires burned in stone pits, providing light and warmth. People moved about, some blue-skinned like Carl, others clearly human, and some species Irwin didn't recognize. All bore the hard, wary look of survivors. What struck Irwin most was the order amid the hardship. This wasn't a desperate camp of castaways. It was an organized community that had adapted to its harsh environment. Children played in a central area, watched over by adults with weapons always within reach. Craftspeople worked with materials clearly sourced from the toxic world outside, creating tools and clothing suited to their needs. A young Salkirian child stopped playing to stare at the newcomers, eyes wide with curiosity. When Irwin smiled at him, the boy darted away, hiding behind an adult who regarded the humans with unconcealed hostility. "Who are all these people?" Julia asked, staying close to Irwin's side as suspicious eyes tracked their movement. "The discarded," Carl answered. "Those the Imperium sent here to die. Some for crimes, others for knowing too much, many for simply being inconvenient. The Salkirians, my people, were the first. When we refused to surrender our homeworld to mining operations, they declared us rebels and sent entire ships here to perish." "But you survived," Irwin noted. Carl's expression hardened. "We adapted, we endured, and we learned that this planet, deadly as it is, provides for those who respect its ways." As they moved deeper into the settlement, Irwin noted defensive positions, food storage areas, water filtration systems, all created from salvaged materials and local resources. These people weren't just surviving, they were building a future on a planet designed to kill them. They were led to the central plaza, where a crowd had gathered to inspect the newcomers. A tall, muscular woman with blue skin stepped forward, her head shaved except for a single braid that hung down her back. Scars crisscrossed her exposed arms, telling stories of countless battles survived. "I am Nicole, War Chief of Sanctuary," she announced, her voice carrying across the plaza. "Carl says you come from the Imperium." "We were sent here by them," Irwin corrected. Not by choice. Nicole's eyes narrowed as she assessed him. Many claim to be victims when faced with death. She grabbed a spear from a nearby warrior and tossed it to Irwin, who caught it reflexively. If you wish to stay among us, you must prove your worth. From a cage at the edge of the plaza, a handler released a creature that made Irwin's blood run cold. A massive beast covered in sharp spines, with jaws that could easily crush bone. It charged immediately, moving with shocking speed for its bulk. "Irwin!" Julia cried out, trying to rush forward only to be held back by two Salkyrian warriors. Irwin barely had time to raise his spear before the creature was upon him. He dodged its first lunge, rolling across the hard stone and coming up in a fighting stance. The crowd had formed a circle, giving him nowhere to escape. This was a test he couldn't fail. The beast circled, its multiple eyes tracking his every movement. When it charged again, Irwin stood his ground until the last possible moment, then sidestepped and drove the spear toward its neck. The point glanced off the creature's tough hide, barely drawing blood. It roared in rage, spines bristling along its back. Memories of combat training flooded back to him, lessons from his first sergeant about fighting larger opponents. Use their weight against them, the grizzled veteran had instructed. Let them commit to the attack, then redirect. The creature circled again, more wary now. Irwin feinted to the left, drawing it toward his seemingly unprotected right side. As it lunged, he spun away, driving the spear deep into its flank. The beast howled, twisting to bite at the weapon lodged in its side. The sudden movement snapped the spear, leaving Irwin weaponless. Julia watched in horror from the sidelines as Irwin fought for his life. The third time the creature charged, it caught him with a glancing blow that sent him sprawling. His broken spear skittered across the stone, out of reach. The beast loomed over him, jaws opening for the kill. In that desperate moment, Irwin spotted a weakness, a soft spot beneath the creature's jaw. As it lunged down to finish him, he rolled and grabbed a sharp stone from the ground, driving it up with all his strength. The improvised weapon sank deep into the unprotected flesh. The beast convulsed, dark blood spurting from the wound, then collapsed beside him. The plaza fell silent. Irwin stood slowly, covered in the creature's blood and his own, breathing hard as he faced Nicole. The war chief's expression remained impassive for a long moment. Then she clenched her fist in what he recognized as a gesture of respect. "You fight, with both courage and cunning," she said. "You may stay, for now." That night, as Julia tended his wounds in the small cave they'd been assigned, Irwin stared at the flame of their oil lamp. His body ached from the fight, each breath sending shards of pain through his already injured ribs. "That was suicidal," Julia muttered as she applied a salve made from local plants to a deep gash on his arm. "You could have died." "We were dead the moment they put us on that pod," Irwin replied. "At least here we have a chance." She paused, her fingers lingering on his arm. "I was scared," she admitted quietly. "When that thing had you pinned, I thought—" Her voice trailed off, the unspoken fear hanging between them. Irwin covered her hand with his. "They've been abandoned here, just like us," he murmured, "left to die on a planet the Imperium claims is uninhabitable." "But why lie about it?" Julia asked, her scientific mind struggling with the deception. "Control," Irwin replied. "Fear. If soldiers knew there was a place where exiles survive beyond Imperial reach, how many would choose freedom over servitude?" In the days that followed, Carl showed them the basics of survival on Archipel 5. The blue-skinned warrior had a natural teacher's patience, demonstrating how to identify safe water sources, which plants could be eaten and which were deadly poisonous, how to recognize the warning signs of toxic gas eruptions before they happen. "The first rule is observation," Carl explained as they hunted in the swamps. "Everything here tells a story if you know how to read it. The way the mist moves can warn of predators. The color of the mud indicates its acidity. The calls of swamp crawlers change when storms approach." Irwin absorbed the lessons eagerly, his military training making him a quick study. Julia approached the challenge differently, applying her engineering mind to the problems of survival. Within days, she had improved the settlement's water filtration system and designed more efficient hunting tools. One evening, as they returned from a successful hunt, they found the settlement in celebration. A group of hunters had returned with a massive kill, a creature like a scaled elephant with 6 legs and tusks that dripped venom. Rare feast, Carl explained, helping to butcher the beast. The meat of the skull crusher can feed the settlement for weeks. Its venom, properly processed, becomes medicine. Its hide makes the strongest armor. The celebration continued into the night, with music played on instruments crafted from bones and stretched hides, dancing around the central fires, and the sharing of a fermented drink that burned Irwin's throat, but left a pleasant warmth in its wake. During the festivities, Irwin noticed Nicole watching him from across the plaza. The war chief made no effort to hide her interest, raising her drinking vessel in acknowledgement when their eyes met. Later, as the celebration wound down, she approached him. "You learn quickly," she observed. "Most off-worlders take months to adapt." "I've had practice," Irwin replied. "Adapting to hostile environments was part of my training." Nicole studied him with those penetrating eyes. "What were you before the Imperium discarded you?" "Special Operations Commander, infiltration, extraction, surgical strikes." "A warrior, then," she nodded approvingly. "And now?" Irwin looked around at the settlement, at the people who had carved a life from this deadly world. "Now, I'm just trying to survive, like everyone else." "Perhaps more than survive," Nicole suggested. "Tomorrow, come train with my warriors. Show us what an Imperial commander knows of combat." The next morning, despite his still healing injuries, Irwin joined Nicole's warriors in their training ground, a flat area of hardened clay near the settlement's edge. The Salkyrians fought with a combination of techniques, some reminiscent of Earth martial arts, others entirely alien. Their style emphasized efficiency of movement, lethal precision, and adaptation to environmental challenges. Nicole herself sparred with Irwin, testing his reflexes and strength. Despite her slender build, she was incredibly strong, her movements lightning fast. Irwin found himself pressed to his limits, using every trick he'd learned in 2 decades of combat. When she finally pinned him, arm across his throat, there was genuine respect in her eyes. "You fight well for a human," she said, helping him up. "With training, you could become formidable." "I thought I already was formidable," Irwin replied with a wry smile. Nicole's laugh was unexpected, a musical sound at odds with her fierce demeanor. "Humility is not a trait I expected from an Imperial commander." "Former Imperial commander," Irwin corrected. "And there's nothing like being sentenced to death to instill a little humility." Their conversation was interrupted by shouts of alarm from outside. Irwin and Nicole raced to the settlement's entrance, where scouts reported movement in the swamps. Something large, moving with purpose toward sanctuary. "Crawler migration," Carl explained grimly. "They move in packs when the acid pools in the far swamps begin to dry up. They'll be hungry, aggressive." Nicole immediately began organizing defenses, positioning warriors at vulnerable points. Irwin joined her, offering tactical suggestions based on what he'd learned of the creature's behavior. "We should funnel them toward the narrow passage there," he pointed. "Create a bottleneck where they can be engaged one at a time." Nicole nodded, adapting her plan accordingly. "Alert the outer sentries," she ordered a young warrior. "No one is to engage the crawlers alone. Fall back to defensive positions if spotted." As preparations continued, their conversation was interrupted by shouts of alarm from outside. Irwin and Nicole raced to the settlement's entrance tunnel, where scouts reported movement in the swamps. Something large, moving with a purpose toward sanctuary. "Crawler migration," Carl explained grimly. "They move in packs when the acid pools in the far swamps begin to dry up. They'll be hungry, aggressive." Nicole immediately began organizing defenses, positioning warriors at vulnerable points, ordering non-combatants to the higher caves. Irwin joined her, offering tactical suggestions based on what he'd learned of the creature's behavior. "We should funnel them toward the narrow passage there," he pointed. "Create a bottleneck where they can be engaged one at a time." Nicole nodded, adapting her plan accordingly. "Alert the outer sentries," she ordered a young warrior. "No one is to engage the crawlers alone. Fall back to defensive positions if spotted." As the settlement prepared for the attack, Irwin sought out Julia. He found her in the workshop area, already working with other engineers to prepare defenses. "We're reinforcing the outer barriers," she explained, not looking up from her work, "and creating traps for the narrow passages. If they breach the outer defenses, we can trigger cave-ins at strategic points." "Good thinking," Irwin approved. "But stay back from the fighting. These creatures are—" "I know what they are," Julia interrupted, looking up with fire in her eyes. "I've spent 2 weeks studying them, and I don't need protection, Irwin. I need respect." He stepped back, surprised by her vehemence. I respect you more than anyone here, Julia. I just don't want to lose you. Her expression softened slightly. Then trust me to take care of myself. I'm not helpless. Before Erwin could respond, alarm horns sounded throughout the settlement. The attack had begun sooner than expected. The crawlers were already in the lower tunnels. Stay safe, Erwin said, squeezing Julia's shoulder before racing toward the sound of combat. The scene in the lower tunnels was chaos. Warriors fighting individually, no coordination, no strategy. Panic threatened to spread as one defender fell, her screams cutting off as a crawler dragged her into the darkness. Assessing the situation in seconds, Erwin climbed to a higher position and shouted, Form a defensive line. Spears in front, ranged weapons behind. To his surprise, the warriors responded to his command, quickly reorganizing into a more effective formation. Julia, he called out, spotting her in the crowd. The storage barrels, are they oil? She glanced at the containers lining the wall. Yes, lamp oil. Roll them down and ignite them when I give the signal. As the creatures advanced, Erwin directed the defense, identifying weaknesses in the swamp crawler's attack pattern. Carl darted between the beasts, drawing their attention while other warriors struck at vulnerable points. Nicole appeared at Erwin's side, fighting with ferocious skill, her spear finding the eyes and throats of the monsters with deadly precision. Now, Julia, Erwin shouted as the creatures bunched together in the narrow passage. Julia and several others pushed the barrels down the incline. As they crashed into the mass of reptilian bodies, flaming arrows ignited the oil, creating an inferno that sent the surviving creatures retreating in panic back into the tunnels. The aftermath was grim, 5 defenders dead, many more wounded. As the injured were tended to and the dead prepared for burial rites, Erwin helped carry a young Salkyrian warrior to the healer's cave, the boy's leg nearly severed by a crawler's bite. He fought well, Nicole said, appearing beside Erwin as the healers worked to save the boy's limb. Many more would have died without your intervention. I've led troops in battle before, he replied, washing blood, both the boys and the creatures, from his hands in a stone basin. Against the Imperium's enemies? Erwin met her gaze steadily. Sometimes against the Imperium itself. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Perhaps that is why they sent you here. She clasped his shoulder, a gesture that seemed to carry more meaning than he yet understood. Rest. Tomorrow you begin training with us. In the days that followed, Erwin and Julia integrated into the community of survivors. Carl taught Erwin how to hunt the dangerous wildlife, showing him which creatures were edible and which contained poison in their flesh. They spent long days tracking through the toxic swamps, where one misstep could mean death in quicksand that digested its victims with acidic compounds. The planet doesn't hate us, Carl explained, as they butchered a 6-legged creature that would feed the settlement for days. It simply doesn't care if we live or die. Once you understand that, survival becomes possible. Nicole instructed Erwin in their unique style of hand-to-hand combat, adapted to the challenges of fighting on a world where one wrong step could mean death in a toxic sinkhole. Her methods were brutal but effective, focusing on ending conflicts quickly with minimal energy expenditure, a necessity in their oxygen-poor environment. During one particularly grueling session, Erwin finally managed to pin Nicole, using a counter she hadn't anticipated. They lay there for a moment, breathing hard, her body pressed against his, neither pulling away immediately. You learn quickly, she said finally, a new respect in her eyes. I had good motivation, Erwin replied, helping her up. Staying alive is a powerful incentive. The moment lingered between them, an unspoken connection that went beyond mere survival alliance. Erwin found himself watching her more often, the grace with which she moved, the authority she commanded without demanding it, the rare moments when her guard lowered enough to reveal the person beneath the war chief's mantle. Most surprisingly, Erwin encountered the horned beast again during a solo hunting expedition. Instead of fleeing or attacking, the creature followed him at a distance, seemingly curious. When Erwin brought down a swamp grazer, a deer-like animal with 6 legs and toxic quills, the horned beast approached cautiously as he field-dressed the kill. Hungry? Erwin asked, tossing a chunk of meat toward the creature. The beast sniffed it carefully before consuming it in one gulp. Over several encounters, Erwin left small offerings of food, gradually earning the beast's trust. He named it Drax, and eventually the massive creature allowed him to approach and even touch its leathery skin. The first time Drax allowed Erwin to mount his back was a revelation. The creature moved through the treacherous terrain with an instinctive understanding that no human could match. Together, they could cover distances that would take days on foot, accessing hunting grounds too dangerous to reach otherwise. When Erwin returned to the settlement riding Drax, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. Children scattered, screaming in terror. Warriors raised weapons. Carl stepped forward, spear ready, but held low in a defensive posture. "By the ancient gods," he breathed. "How did you tame a thornback?" Erwin slid from Drax's back, keeping one hand on the creature's flank to reassure it. "I didn't tame him," he replied. "We came to an understanding." Nicole pushed through the gathered crowd, her expression a mix of awe and suspicion. "Thornbacks have killed more of our people than any other creature," she said. "They hunt for sport, not just food." "Maybe he's different," Erwin suggested, scratching Drax between his front horns, eliciting a rumbling purr. "Or maybe he's just as much of an outcast as the rest of us. Doesn't fit in with his own kind, found a different path." Carl studied the beast with newfound respect. "If you can tame a thornback, perhaps there's hope for all of us yet." In the weeks that followed, Drax became Erwin's constant companion, a fearsome guardian that enhanced his status within the settlement. The creature seemed to understand complex commands, could track prey across miles of treacherous terrain, and showed unexpected gentleness with the settlement's children once they overcame their initial fear. Meanwhile, Julia's engineering skills proved invaluable to the settlement. She repaired and improved their weapons, designed more efficient traps for defense, and even managed to salvage parts from their crashed pod to create a rudimentary communication system. Though they couldn't send messages off-planet, they could now coordinate between the scattered outposts of survivors. "You've given us an advantage we've never had before," an elder told her as she demonstrated the communication devices. "Distance has always made us vulnerable. Now we can warn each other of dangers, share resources." Julia blushed at the praise. "It's just basic engineering. If I had better materials—" "But you don't," the elder interrupted gently. "And still you created something valuable. That is the way of survival here, making strength from what others would see as nothing." As the weeks passed, Erwin found himself feeling increasingly at home among these outcasts. The constant danger forged bonds stronger than any he'd known in the Imperial forces. When he wasn't hunting or training, he spent time with the elders of the Salkirian people, learning their history and the truth about Archipper 5. "The Imperium has been sending its unwanted here for decades," an elder named Mira told him, her blue skin wrinkled with age. "Officially, this is listed as a dead planet where survival is impossible. The truth is, thousands live here, scattered across the safer regions." "It's a prison without walls," Erwin realized. "No need for guards when the planet itself is the jailer." "Yet we persist," Mira replied with quiet dignity. "We build, we adapt, we survive. And one day perhaps we will do more than merely survive." The old Salkirian's eyes gleamed with an emotion Erwin couldn't quite identify. "Some say that is why you were sent to us, human. A warrior with the knowledge of our enemy, riding a beast no one has tamed before. There are prophecies among my people." "I'm no prophetic figure," Erwin interrupted uncomfortably. "Just a soldier who disobeyed orders." Mira smiled, her wrinkled face crinkling further. "History is written by those who survive to tell it. Who knows what the songs will say of you in a generation's time?" Not everything was harmonious, however. As Erwin spent more time with Nicole, training and planning settlement defenses, Julia became increasingly distant. The tension came to a head one evening when Erwin returned from a patrol with Nicole. Both of them mud-splattered but laughing over a near miss with a sinkhole. "You trust her more than me now," Julia accused when they were alone in their cave. "After everything we've been through." "That's not true," Erwin replied, taken aback by her vehemence. "We're all fighting to survive here." "Is that all it is? Because she looks at you like you're more than just an ally, and you look at her the same way." Julia's voice cracked slightly, revealing the hurt beneath her anger. "Julia," Erwin began, reaching for her. She stepped back. "I watched you nearly die in that arena. I thought when you survived, when we found this place, that maybe we—" She shook her head. "Forget it. It doesn't matter." "It does matter," Erwin insisted. We're all on edge here, Julia. Every day could be our last. We have to trust each other. Trust? She laughed bitterly. The Imperium trusted us enough to send us to die. Nicole trusts you because you're useful to her people. What happens when that changes? Before Erwin could respond, alarm horns sounded throughout the settlement. They rushed outside to find people pointing at the sky, where small metallic objects glinted in the dim sunlight. Imperial drones, Carl said grimly, clutching his spear. Scout units. As they watched, one drone swooped low over the settlement. Carl hurled his spear with incredible accuracy, impaling the machine in midair. It crashed to the ground, in a shower of sparks, but the damage was done. The other drones accelerated away, transmitting their findings back to Imperial Command. They know we're here now, Erwin said, picking up the damaged drone. They'll come in force. Julia examined the machine, her engineer's mind already analyzing its components. I might be able to extract some intel from this. Give me a few hours. The settlement council gathered that night in the central chamber, a cave with stalactites hanging like stone daggers from the ceiling, walls adorned with maps of the surrounding territory. Elders sat on carved stone benches, while warriors and hunters stood in a circle around a central fire pit. Erwin and Julia were invited to join, an honor that recognized their contributions. The Imperium has found us, Nicole announced without preamble. We must decide our response. Some argued for abandoning Sanctuary, dispersing into the wilderness where they'd be harder to track. Others insisted on standing their ground in the defensive position they'd spent years fortifying. Running buys us nothing but time, Nicole said firmly. They'll hunt us down eventually. I say we fight here. On ground we know. Fight the Imperium? An elder scoffed. With spears against ships? That's suicide. Not necessarily, Julia interjected, stepping forward. I've analyzed the drone. It wasn't looking for us specifically. It was part of a survey operation. She projected data from her tablet, showing the drone's flight path. They're mapping potential mining sites. Finding us was incidental. Which means they'll send a elimination force, not a full battle fleet, Erwin added. Still dangerous, but not impossible to defeat. All eyes turned to him. Despite his relatively recent arrival, his military experience and leadership during the swamp crawler attack had earned him a voice in their deliberations. How would you defeat them, off-worlder? Challenged a scarred Salkirian hunter. Nicole is right, Erwin said after a moment's consideration. This is defensible terrain, and we have something they don't expect. Knowledge of how to use this planet against them. He moved to the crude map of the surrounding area. They'll land here, where the ground is firm enough for heavy vehicles. They'll expect scattered, disorganized resistance, individual survivors fighting for their lives. Instead, we'll give them a coordinated defense they aren't prepared for. The council voted to stand and fight. In the days that followed, Erwin worked tirelessly to prepare the settlement's defenses. He trained the warriors in guerrilla tactics, showing them how to strike from cover and disappear before the enemy could respond. Julia created explosives using energy cells from the pod and volatile minerals found in the caves. Carl led scouting parties to map approach routes and establish early warning systems. Nicole drilled the youngest and strongest in close-quarter combat techniques. Drax proved unexpectedly useful, his keen senses detecting danger long before human or Salkirian could. He led Erwin to hidden cave systems that could serve as escape routes or ambush points. The great beast seemed to understand the gravity of their situation, growing more protective of Erwin and the settlement with each passing day. One evening, as Erwin worked late mapping defense positions, Nicole found him alone in the strategy cave. You should rest, she said, sitting beside him. Exhaustion kills as surely as any Imperial weapon. I'll rest when they are defeated, Erwin replied, not looking up from his work. Nicole placed her hand over his, stilling his movement. We have lived here for years, surviving against all odds. Whatever comes, we will face it together. Erwin finally met her gaze. I led soldiers before, in battles across dozens of worlds, but never against these odds, never with these stakes. What is different here, she asked. Everything, he admitted. There, I was fighting for an empire I didn't believe in. Here, he gestured to the map, to the marks representing people he'd come to know. Here, I'm fighting for something real. Nicole leaned closer, her voice dropping. And is that why you fight? For the cause? I fight for the people, Erwin said. For you. The distance between them vanished as she closed the final gap, her lips finding his with unexpected gentleness from someone so fierce in battle. When they separated, her eyes held a vulnerability he'd never seen there before. "Tomorrow we may die," she whispered. "Tonight, let us live." They spent the night together, finding in each other's arms a moment of peace amidst the preparations for war. When dawn came, such as it was on this world of perpetual twilight, they returned to their duties without reference to what had passed between them. But something had changed, a bond forged that went beyond mere alliance. Later that day, as Erwin was instructing a group of younger warriors in ambush techniques, he caught sight of Julia watching from a distance, her expression unreadable. When he approached her afterward, she turned away, focusing intently on the explosive charges she was preparing. "Julia," he began awkwardly, "about last night." "I saw you with her," Julia interrupted, not looking up. "You don't owe me an explanation." "I think I do," Erwin insisted. "You and I came here together. As prisoners sent to die," she finished for him. "Not as—" She trailed off, then shook her head. "It doesn't matter. We have more important things to worry about right now than whatever this is." Before Erwin could respond, a scout burst into the chamber, breathing hard. "Ships!" he gasped. "Imperial ships breaking atmosphere!" The alarm spread through the settlement. Warriors grabbed weapons, non-combatants retreated to deeper caves, explosive traps were armed. Erwin found Carl at the observation post, where they could see distant shapes descending through the toxic clouds. 14 days after the drone sighting, the first Imperial dropships broke through the planet's toxic cloud cover. Heavy assault craft designed for hostile environments, they carried troops in grav tanks and armored combat suits, far more firepower than would be necessary for a simple mining survey. "They're not here to establish a mining operation," Erwin told the assembled warriors as they watched the ships descend. "They're here to exterminate everyone on this planet. The Imperium can't risk word getting out that Archipper 5 is habitable. It would undermine their ultimate threat against dissenters." Nicole approached, war paint streaking her face in patterns that accentuated the angles of her features. "Then we will show them the true meaning of this planet's name." "What does Archipper mean?" Julia asked, joining them with a backpack full of explosive devices. "In the old tongue," Nicole replied grimly, "it means graveyard of the proud." The first wave of Imperial forces advanced with typical arrogance, their heavy vehicles plowing through the swamplands toward the cliffs that housed Sanctuary. They didn't expect the ground beneath them to suddenly give way, swallowing entire squads in specially prepared sinkholes. They weren't prepared for the toxic gas pockets Julia had rigged to ignite as they passed, engulfing their formations in blue flame. Most of all, they weren't ready for the coordinated resistance led by someone who knew their tactics intimately. Erwin positioned snipers in hidden crevices, directed ambush teams to strike at support units rather than heavily armored frontline troops, and used Drax and other trained beasts to create chaos in their supply lines. The fighting was brutal and personal. In one skirmish, Erwin led a small team to ambush an Imperial patrol, only to find himself face to face with soldiers wearing the insignia of his former unit. For a moment he hesitated, recognizing faces of men he'd once commanded. "Commander Erwin?" one soldier gasped, lowering his weapon slightly. "They said you were dead." "In a way, I was," Erwin replied, feeling the weight of the choice before him. "You don't have to die here, Sergeant. Surrender." "We can't," the man replied, raising his weapon again. "You know what they do to deserters." The firefight that followed left none of the Imperial soldiers standing. As Erwin knelt beside the dying sergeant, the man grasped his arm with fading strength. "They lied to us," he whispered. "Said this was a terrorist camp." His eyes widened with the clarity that sometimes comes with approaching death. "It's just people." "Yes," Erwin said softly, closing the man's eyes when he breathed his last. "Just people trying to survive." For 3 days, the battle raged across the foothills. Imperial commanders, frustrated by mounting casualties against what they'd expected to be minimal resistance, committed their reserves to a frontal assault on Sanctuary itself. "They're coming straight up the main. Approach," Carl reported, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "At least 50 heavy troopers with full air support." Erwin nodded grimly. "Just as we planned. Get everyone into position." Julia approached, her face streaked with soot, eyes burning with determination. "The charges are set," On your signal. Be careful, Irwin told her, catching her arm before she could leave. Your position is exposed. For a moment, her expression softened. I survived being sent to this death trap. I'll survive this too. She squeezed his hand once, then disappeared down a side tunnel. The Imperial troops marched up the carved stone pathway, energy weapons at the ready, confident that their superior firepower would overwhelm any resistance. What they didn't know was that Julia had spent weeks hollowing out strategic sections of the cliff and rigging them with explosives. As the main force reached the midpoint of the ascent, Irwin gave the signal. Julia activated the detonator, and the entire face of the cliff seemed to shudder. Massive boulders broke free, thundering down on the Imperial troops, crushing some instantly and trapping others. Before the survivors could regroup, Nicole led a charge from hidden tunnels, her warriors falling upon the disoriented soldiers with savage efficiency. Irwin fought in the thickest part of the battle, Drax at his side. The beast had become a terrifying weapon, his horns goring armored troops, his powerful limbs smashing through reinforced helmets. When an Imperial officer targeted Irwin with a plasma cannon, it was Nicole who threw herself into its path, taking the shot that would have killed him. Nicole! Irwin screamed as she fell, the blast burning through her armor and into the flesh beneath. He rushed to her side, dragging her behind cover as return fire peppered the rocks around them. Not yet, she gasped, blood trickling from her mouth. Not finished. Irwin carried her to safety as Julia provided covering fire. The medics took Nicole immediately, their expressions grim as they assessed her wounds. Irwin wanted to stay with her, but the battle called him back. His people needed him. His people. The thought struck him with surprising force as he rejoined the fight. Somewhere in the weeks since their arrival, these outcasts had become his people, this harsh world his home. He fought now not just to survive, but to protect what they had built together. The final turning point came when Carl led a small team to capture an Imperial gunship. Using knowledge from his days as a navigator, he managed to override the security protocols and turn the ship's weapons against the Imperial command center. The resulting chaos, combined with mounting casualties and the inexplicable loss of communications, finally broke the Imperial resolve. The remaining troops retreated to their dropships, abandoning equipment and even wounded comrades in their haste to escape. As the last Imperial ship vanished into the toxic clouds, a ragged cheer went up from the defenders. They had suffered losses. Graves would need to be dug, wounds tended, defenses rebuilt. But Sanctuary still stood. More importantly, they had proven that the Imperium was not invincible, that even on the harshest world in the galaxy, the will to survive could overcome superior technology and numbers. Irwin found Julia amid the celebration, her arm in a makeshift sling, but otherwise unharmed. You did it, she said, a genuine smile breaking through her exhaustion. You led them to victory. We did it, he corrected, including her in the triumph. Your explosives turned the tide. Before she could respond, a young Salkirian healer approached them. She's asking for you, the healer said to Irwin. The war chief. Her wounds? She doesn't have long. Irwin felt his heart constrict. Take me to her. Nicole lay in the healing chambers, her blue skin ashen, the wound in her side clearly beyond their limited medical capabilities. Yet her eyes were clear, focused, as Irwin knelt beside her. Did we win? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Irwin answered, taking her hand. They're gone. Sanctuary is safe. A smile touched her lips. Good. That's good. She tightened her grip on his hand with surprising strength. The council will need a new war chief, someone who understands both worlds. Nicole, Irwin began, but she shook her head. Listen, what we built here, it's just the beginning. Archie Per 5 was supposed to be our prison, but we've made it a fortress, a refuge. Her breathing became more labored. The next war chief must see beyond mere survival, must lead us towards something greater. I will, Irwin promised, understanding what she was asking of him. I'll protect them, lead them. I know, she whispered. That's why I loved you. Her hand relaxed in his as her eyes closed for the final time. Irwin stayed there, holding her cooling fingers, until Carl gently placed a hand on his shoulder. She died as she lived, the Salkirian said softly, protecting her people. Our people, Irwin corrected, finally releasing Nicole's hand. In the days following the battle, the settlement began the process of healing and rebuilding. The dead were honored in a solemn ceremony. Their bodies returned to the planet that had both challenged and sheltered them. The wounded were tended with medicines created from local plants, some recovering, others marked forever by their sacrifice. Irwin found himself at the center of a community transformed by victory. What had been a collection of survivors was becoming something more, a society with purpose beyond mere existence. The council met frequently, planning expansions to the settlement, new defenses, expeditions to locate other groups of outcasts scattered across the planet. Throughout it all, Julia worked tirelessly, applying her engineering genius to improve their lives. She created more efficient heating systems, better water purification, stronger weapons. In her spare moments, she studied the captured Imperial technology, looking for weaknesses to exploit in future confrontations. "You're working too hard," Irwin told her one evening, finding her alone in her workshop long after others had retired for the night. She looked up, shadows under her eyes but a light of excitement in them. "I think I can modify their communication system," she said, gesturing to the salvaged parts spread before her. "Not just to talk between settlements, but maybe to reach off-world." Irwin sat beside her. "You think we could contact other systems? Beyond Imperial control?" "Possibly," she admitted. "It's a long shot, but—" She trailed off, then looked at him directly. "What happened with Nicole?" "I'm sorry." "Thank you," he said simply. "She was a good leader, fierce but fair." Julia hesitated. "She saw something in you that the rest of us saw from the beginning." "And what's that?" "Hope," Julia replied. "You came here with nothing, same as all of us. But you never acted like someone sentenced to die. You acted like someone building a future." Irwin was silent for a long moment. "I never thought I'd find a home here, a purpose beyond surviving another day. And now? Now," he said slowly, "I think this is where I was always meant to be, fighting for something real, not imperial lies." Julia's smile was genuine, if tinged with sadness. "The council is voting tomorrow, on the new war chief." "I know. It will be you," she said with certainty. "There's no one else they would choose." The next morning, as the dim light of Archipier 5's sun filtered through the cave entrances, the council gathered. Elders, warriors, craftspeople, representatives from every aspect of settlement life. Irwin stood before them, Drax at his side, a living symbol of his unique connection to this world. "We have survived the Imperium's attempt to exterminate us," the eldest Salkyrian began. "But they will return, with greater forces. We must be ready." The council debated, voices raised in argument about the path forward. Some advocated greater secrecy, hiding deeper in the planet's most inhospitable regions. Others argued for a more aggressive approach, striking Imperial outposts before they could organize another attack. Through it all, Irwin remained silent, listening. When finally asked for his opinion, he stepped forward. "The Imperium sent us all here to die," he said, his voice carrying to the farthest corners of the chamber. "They believed this planet would be our grave. Instead, it has become our home, our strength." He gestured to the gathered representatives. "Look at what we've built together. Humans, Salkyrians, other species, all working as one. The Imperium fears nothing more than unity among those it oppresses." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. "We will not hide," Irwin continued, "nor will we rush headlong into battles we cannot win. We will grow stronger. We will find other settlements, form alliances. And when the time is right, we will show the Imperium that those they discard become their greatest threat." The vote was unanimous. Irwin, once an Imperial commander sentenced to die on a toxic world, became War Chief of Sanctuary. As the council dispersed, he found himself standing on the high outcropping that overlooked the swamps and toxic plains, watching the mists swirl below. Julia joined him, a rare moment of peace amid their constant struggle for survival. "What do you think they would say," she asked, "if they could see you now? The council that sentenced you to death?" Irwin smiled, a rare expression that transformed his battle-worn face. Their faces would be priceless. In the aftermath, Irwin found himself standing on a high outcropping, watching the toxic mists swirl below. Julia joined him, her face streaked with soot, but eyes bright with triumph. The council wants to see you, she said quietly. They're gathering to select a new war chief. Erwin nodded, still gazing at the harsh landscape that had nearly claimed his life, and now felt strangely like home. Nicole thought it should be me. Of course she did, Julia replied. So does everyone else. She hesitated, then added, including me. He turned to look at her, surprised. Even after everything? Especially after everything. She met his gaze directly. The council thought they were sentencing you to death. Instead, they gave you an army. As they made their way back to the settlement, a scout rushed toward them, excitement evident in every movement. Ships! She cried. More ships approaching. Erwin's heart sank. Had the Imperials returned so quickly with greater forces? But the scout's next words changed everything. Not Imperial vessels. Independent traders, bearing the mark of the Free Worlds Alliance. When the first communication came through on the frequency Julia had established, the voice was gruff but friendly. Sanctuary, do you read? This is Captain Rodriguez of the independent vessel Defiance. We heard you gave the Imperials quite a bloody nose. Thought you might like a lift off this rock, for those who want it. Erwin couldn't believe his ears. Rodriguez, his old mentor, supposedly dead for years. He grabbed the communicator from Julia. Captain, this is Commander Erwin. I thought you were dead. A barking laugh came through the speaker. They tried their best, son, just like they tried with you. We've been building a network, finding the discarded, bringing them into the fight. You in? Erwin looked around at the faces watching him. Julia, Carl, the elders, the warriors, all waiting for his decision. This wasn't just about escape anymore. This was about taking the fight back to the empire that had tried to bury them. We're in, he replied, but not all of us are leaving. Sanctuary is our home now, our fortress. Understood, Rodriguez replied. We'll send down shuttles for volunteers and supplies for those staying. Welcome to the Resistance, Commander. Or should I say War Chief? As the settlements buzzed with the news, preparations, decisions, Erwin found Julia organizing the distribution of the promised supplies. Will you go? He asked quietly. She considered for a moment. There's so much I could do with proper equipment, ways to help the fight. Then she looked at him. But someone needs to keep improving our defenses here. Make this place truly impregnable. A small smile. Besides, I'm just starting to get used to the smell. Erwin laughed, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. It does grow on you. Carl approached, leading Drax by a newly fashioned harness. The beast refuses to board the shuttles. Seems he's staying too. Good, Erwin said, scratching Drax between his horns. We're going to need him. 3 days later, as the last of the volunteer fighters boarded the shuttles, taking with them tales of Sanctuary and its unlikely leader, Erwin stood with his core group, those who had chosen to remain and build something on this world that had been meant as their tomb. The Imperium's faces when they learn you survived, with a thornback as your pet no less, will be priceless, Carl remarked with a grin. Erwin watched as the ships rose into the toxic clouds, carrying hope and defiance back to the stars. This isn't over, he said. It's just beginning. As the ships disappeared from view, Erwin turned back to the settlement. His settlement now, his responsibility. Drax nudged his hand, sensing his mood as the creature always seemed to do. Julia stood beside him, her expression determined, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Carl and the other warriors waited for his command, their trust a weight he would bear willingly. The Imperium had sent him here to die alone and forgotten. Instead, he had found purpose, community, even love. He had become the leader of a resistance they never anticipated, on a world they thought uninhabitable. And one day when the time was right, they would return to the stars, not as exiles, but as liberators. Come, he said to his people, we have work to do.